Open, if you will, please, to Genesis chapter 18 and find verse 16. As we take a look today at the Genesis 13:12 effect, the high cost of low conviction. While you're finding the Genesis passage, I want to share. You don't even know this person. His name is Buck Barnhill. He was one of my students. And he had cancer, and I told him one day, I said, Buck, when we started these classes, I thought you'd probably be one of the first ones to drop out. He was shy. He didn't like to talk in front of anybody. He just seemed real befuddled a lot of the times. But Buck persevered, never complained about his cancer. And it was liver cancer that spread. And Buck kept saying, I just want to finish the class before I die. I want to finish the class. Last week, they had their last class on Monday. He had a heart attack on Tuesday. Went to be with Jesus. His cancer was so bad, he was preaching once, and he said, I need to sit down. And there wasn't a fence, and so he sat on the choir row, and he kept preaching, and he kept feeling bad, sitting down preaching. So he laid down on the front row of the choir and finished his sermon. The brother had perseverance. I miss him already. A great brother and a great friend. There should be a different slide up there. That was last week. You can take that one down. Don't turn to 17. Turn to 18. Genesis 18. But pray for Buck's widow, Suzanne. She goes through a lot that'll be coming with that. But Genesis chapter 18. We begin reading in verse 16. Now this is a chapter and a half, so we're not going to read it all at one time. But I want us to get verses 16 through 33 to begin with in chapter 18. As we look at the Genesis 13:12 effect, it'll help us to flip back to 13 and verse 12. In chapter 13 and verse 12 says, Abraham settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley. And New American Standard said, moved his tents as far as Sodom. I like King James Version. He pitched his tent towards Sodom. So Abraham lived in Canaan, the land of promise, and Lot chose the land of Sodom. Verse 16 of chapter 18 now says, Then the men arose up from there and looked down towards Sodom. So they were up on an elevated area looking down next to the Dead Sea, and Sodom was there on the shores. Looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to send them off. The Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. For I have chosen him, so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. And the Lord said, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. Now I will go down now and see if they have done entirely according to its outcry which has come to me, and if not, I will know. Then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham was still standing before the Lord. Abraham came near and said, Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you indeed sweep it away, not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? So the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the whole place on their account. And Abraham replied, now behold, I have ventured to speak to the Lord, although I am but dust and ashes. Suppose the 50 righteous are lacking 5. Will you destroy the whole city because of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. He spoke to him again and said, suppose 40 are found there. Sounds like an auctioneer, doesn't it? Going backwards. Suppose 40 are found there. And he said, I will not do it on account of 40. Then he said, oh, my Lord, not be angry with me. Oh, may the Lord not be angry with me. And I shall speak. Suppose 30 are found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, now I have ventured to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. He said, I will not destroy on the count of 20. Then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I shall speak only this once. So his last time. Suppose 10 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of the 10. As soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place. Father, thank you for the word. Thank you for this compassion that Abraham had for not only Lot and Lot's wife and Lot's daughters, but for the whole cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. God, give us a compassion for the lost around us, those who are immersed in sin and without Jesus Christ as their Savior. Give us compassion, Father, to love and to seek their betterment, to seek their deliverance, to seek their salvation. And God, we pray that you will help us, that not only will we work, but we will also pray. God, asking you to move in the hearts of people, to accomplish your purposes of grace and to show mercy. And Father, as we will continue on into chapter 19, and we see that the destruction that does come because there was a lack of righteous 10 people in the city, and all the fallout that comes as a result. God, help us to be able to see clearly that there is a high cost when we have low convictions. And that cost can pay the price for generations. Lord, open our ears, our eyes, our understanding. Make our heart fully yielded to you. In Christ's name, amen. Now this passage, and if you weren't here last week, and incidentally, all of the sermons in this series, this is the 8th of the 15 sermons, but they're all on the YouTube channel, or you can find them on our Facebook page. That you can pick up and catch up. But last week is as we looked at the first part of chapter 18, verses 1 through 15. It's where their names were changed, and there was a promise that now we're going to see that there's a difference coming about, because specifically a child is promised, and that child's name is Isaac, coming a year from the time the promise was made. And now those 3, the Lord and 2 angels who appeared to give this promise, now they're on with the mission that was the second part of why they came, was to go to Sodom, where the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah was indeed great. Verse 20, and their sin is exceedingly grave. Bear in mind as we go through this message today, because I believe that this message may be the most pivotal message in all of these 15 messages. Bear in mind that the convictions that we act on now will shape the outcome of the future that we must live later. The convictions that we act on now will shape the future of the outcome that we must live later. We make decisions about the smallest matters in life, and sometimes a decision may seem incredibly small. It may be a financial decision, it may be a career decision. Whatever that decision is, a relationship, whatever the move is in this decision, the ramifications of that decision are felt years later. We are from Georgia and lived in Georgia. When we graduated seminary with my master's, we moved back to Georgia. A church had called us there. When we got a call to consider coming to Florida. Funny thing is, it wasn't that I dared God this, but I just always said I would never pastor in Florida and I would never pastor a First Baptist church. And we told them no. And then God wouldn't leave us alone, and we wound up coming to Florida to pastor a First Baptist church. And it was a challenging time. But part of the issue is I knew that if we moved at the age of our children, it was likely that the man who would be my son-in-law and the woman who would be my daughter-in-law would be from Florida. Not that there was anything wrong with it, except for my son-in-law is an Auburn fan, but that notwithstanding, it's a matter to where I knew coming that making this decision to follow God in His leading to Florida was going to impact who my grandchildren are going to be and are. And it's going to impact the direction for life in a number of different areas. Our decisions have consequences. Lot made a decision not to live in the promised land, but to pitch his tent toward Sodom, toward the city, not out where he could graze his cattle, but toward the city. And at the moment, it seemed like it was just a decision that he was going to be closer to town, perhaps, whatever justifications he may have given. But that decision formulates all that we see in the second part of chapter 18 and in all of chapter 19, and the destruction that came as a result of that. But with this, I want us to follow the text and see how these convictions, or the lack of convictions, play out in Abraham's life versus playing out in Lot's life. So as we look at this, look first in these verses that we read, 16 through 33. Abraham's convictions led to intercession. Now, the subtitle for the series, Life in the Maze, is Failing Forward in the Journey of Faith. Abraham is showing that he is failing from time to time, but he's failing forward. He's learning, he's growing, he's advancing. He's not perfect, because we'll see as we continue this series through chapter 25 that there are times that he continues to sin. But what we do see here is that it led him to intercede, to pray. Abraham anchors his life in God's character, not in the culture around him. Write that down somewhere and decide that you're going to let that be the focus of your family. That he anchored his character. He anchored his convictions in the character of God and not in the culture around. It is when we anchor ourselves to the culture around us that we begin to fail. When our daughter was young and in elementary school, and by that age where all the girls wanted to get their ears pierced And when they start, they want to start doing those things that older girls do. Sue had rallied with some of the other parents, some of the other moms who had children that were the same age as Mallory, and they all agreed that if they get their ears pierced, we'll get them at relatively the same time. They all agreed that leg shaving would come at relatively the same time, that the earrings that they wear would start off being post, and at some time later they could go to dangles. But to say, we're not just going to open the floodgates and let you be a part of the culture in every way. It's the anniversary coming up on John Benet Ramsey when she was murdered in the basement of her parents' home. And all of those photographs that they want to show of John Benet Ramsey was where the little 8 or 9-year-old girl looked like a 30 or 40-year-old glamour model. Anchoring in the character of God rather than giving in to the culture around us. With that, it's like a firefighter. When we look at a firefighter and he sees smoke, he's not going to ignore the smoke. He's going to go where the smoke is, because it may very well be that there are lives in danger, and he's going to go against that, but he's going to do it based on his convictions. And Abraham interceded for, and he prayed for. He went to God, asking God, God, will you spare them? You're not going to destroy the righteous along with the wicked. There's no doubt that there was wickedness. Verse 20 says, and the Lord said, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. There is no question that the sin was very, very powerful and present in the lives of the occupants and the residents of Sodom and Gomorrah. When we were in New Orleans, one of the things that in one of my classes is we went to the French Quarter to do evangelism. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to the French Quarter, but people don't go to the French Quarter to encounter Jesus. I just want to lay that out there. That's not why they go. It's Jesus is the last thing. In fact, you can see a man, with boots and khakis on and a buttoned-up Western shirt, and you know that he's in the city, away from his wife and away from his kids, and you know that scantily dressed woman who is walking beside him in incredible high heels and makeup that would make a TV star blush. You know that's not his wife, and that's why he came. But that's not what is best for him being there. Our convictions can't be that we're going to give in to the culture. Our convictions can't be that we're going to lead our families in such a way that we give in to the culture. The sin is great. So we would be in the French Quarter and we would be sharing the gospel, and oftentimes there were people who were mocking us and making fun of us, and crowds would gather around, and it was just a horrible, horrible deal. Besides the fact that just cold sharing the gospel is something that I'm not super excited about, because Jesus built relationships. When he was with the woman at the well, he got to know her enough, and he built a relationship with her, so much so that when he revealed himself to her as the Messiah, she went into town and got the men who knew her and said, come, I want to introduce you to the Messiah. She became one out of those relationships to go. But we look and we see situations like this. Convictions about God's character should move us to pray for our families. Convictions about God's character should move us to pray for our friends and for our communities. Do we believe enough in God's mercy to intercede for the lost? When we prayer walked the schools before the school season started, it's not just an activity to do. It is praying God's protection over the school, praying that no harm would come, physical harm, emotional harm, sexual harm, philosophical harm, in whatever way that harm would come, praying that no harm would come, because even though we have to live in the culture, we don't want to give in to the culture so that the culture is imprinted on us in such a horrible way. But while Abraham prayed out of his conviction, Lot was living with convictions that had become corroded by the culture that was around him. In chapter 19, verses 1 through 14, we see that the scene unfolds to where, in verse 1, now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. And when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. And he said, now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet, and you may rise early and go on your way. They said, however, no, but we'll spend the night in the square. Yet he urged them strongly. He urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. He prepared a feast for them, and he baked unleavened bread, and he gave it them to eat. Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter, and they called to Lot and said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may have relations with them. But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him. And he said, please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Now behold, I have two daughters who have not had relations with man. But let me bring them out to you, and do to them whatever you like. Only do nothing to these men, inasmuch as they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, stand aside. Furthermore, they said, the one who came in as an alien, and already he is acting like a judge. Now, we will treat you worse than them. So they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break the door. But the men reached out their hand and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great. And they wearied themselves trying to find the doorway. Then the two men said to Lot, whom else have you here? A son-in-law, and your sons, and your daughters, and whoever you have in the city, bring them out to the place. For we are about to destroy this place, because their outcry has become so great before the Lord, that the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law. He had two daughters, spoke to his sons-in-law. These were betrothed. They weren't married at the time. But he spoke to them who were to marry his daughters, and he said, up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he appeared to his sons-in-law to be jesting. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your two daughters. Couldn't find 10. Lot, his wife, and his two daughters. There are 4 here. For you will be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he hesitated, so that the men seized his hand, that is, the angel seized his hand and the hand of his wife and the hands of his daughters. For the compassion of the Lord was upon him. They brought him, literally drug him out to the place outside the city. Wow. Lot's compassion erodes his conviction. Now, take a look at what's verse 1 tells us that Lot was sitting at the gate. He was sitting at the gate. That's the marketplace. That's where they would have made the decisions. That's where you'd say the city council was meeting. So what we see here is that he's not just living there, he's a part of the system. He's pitched his tent toward Sodom. Now he's living in Sodom. He's moved in. He's made peace with all of the sin that's around. He's okay being in the midst of that. Evil shows up at his doorsteps, and when evil shows up at his doorsteps, his response is to reveal how deeply his convictions have eroded. He even offers his daughters to show how he has compromised, and his compromise has distorted his moral clarity. When you watch a show, are you okay with the language? Well, you know, if you're going to see TV, you're going to have to put up with it. There are options. We pay $109 a year for a subscription to VidAngel so that we can filter out what we don't want to see. There are options. Are you okay with the language? Does the F-bomb slipping out on television in presence of your wife or your children, you okay with that? A friend of ours used to ask, how many roaches are you good with in your soup? And just one roach? Or you want no roaches? But yet we bring in our minds and we grow accustomed to it. And we see that our compromise has brought us to the place to where it's distorted our moral character in so many ways. If you put metal in water, over time it's going to rust slowly. At first it's going to look strong, but before long it's going to have eaten its way through and it's going to compromise, and the corrosion's going to make it weak and to bring incredible compromise to that. This is what we see with Sodom. Here he is. Lot's right in the middle of it. Lot knew better. These strangers showed up and Lot immediately jumped into action. Oh, come to my house. They said, no, we'll just sleep here in the square, which was kind of a custom in a place that had no ends. And verse 3 says, yet he urged them strongly. No, you can't sleep here because I know what's going to come about. He knew, he had the convictions, he had the knowledge of it. A lot of us who have the knowledge of the right things in life, a lot of us have the knowledge that this is good or this is bad. We have the knowledge of these things. But still we compromise. Even though he knew what was right, he compromised. So much so that in order to protect the guests who were there under his roof, he offered his daughters. Here, take my daughters. They've never had relations with a man before. Take my daughters. You see that small compromise of pitching his tent towards Sodom set up the situation for the collapse that was coming to his family. We say our family is the most important thing for us and to us, but yet we can compromise so easily. And then when disaster comes, when problems begin to fall and that moral clarity is corroded all the way through, and situations in our children and in their generations begin to quake and to rock and all sorts of things come, we have to remind ourselves that even though we're not 100% responsible for the behavior of our generation after us, we do contribute to our generation after us. Small compromises today can lead to great collapses tomorrow. But compromise weakens conviction, there's no doubt about it. But God's mercy does not abandon Lot. Take a look, if you will, in verse 15. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Get your wife, get your daughters, let's get out of here." Verse 16, he hesitated. They literally, out of God's mercy, had to drag him out of the city. They took him by his arm, by his hands, and they had, because of compassion, they brought him out. They drug him out of the city so that he could escape. There are times that in God's mercy, God grabs a hold to us. And He drags us into a situation that we may not like, that we may not want to be in. But it's out of His compassion that He does it so that we'll be able to pick up and to move forward. Verse 17 says, when they brought him outside, one said, "Escape for your life. Don't look behind you. And do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, or you'll be swept away." Lot had become so accustomed to compromise, he even wants to compromise here. Verse 18. But Lot said to them, "Oh no, my Lord. Now, look, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have magnified your loving kindness, which you have shown to me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, for the disaster will overtake me and I will die. Now behold, the town is near enough to flee to. A small town. Let's go to Zoar." And the angels relent. When we begin to compromise one area, it makes it so much easier to compromise another area, and another area, and another area. And in the midst of this compromise, we begin to see the erosion of the foundation in our lives. The Psalm says, if the foundations are destroyed, what will the righteous stand on? On what shall the righteous stand? It was God's mercy that drug him out. And even then, he wanted to compromise just a little more. I don't want to go up to the mountains. I want to stay in Zoar. But in verses 30 through 38, we see that the legacy of misplaced conviction can last for generations upon generations upon generations. Because it was in this situation that they ultimately went up to the mountains. His wife had turned into a pillar of salt because she looked back after being instructed not to look back. The two girls who had also been compromised in their convictions because of living in Sodom, being surrounded by so much wrong, it had shaped their thinking in this culture of Sodom. They got their daddy drunk. They had relations with their daddy, and each of them bore a son. The two sons were, number one, a Moabite. Number two, the Ammonites. The Moabites and the Ammonites have been enemies of the people of God for centuries. And their origin is rooted in compromise. Centuries they were enemies of God. All because Lot's decision to pitch his tent towards Sodom. And it continues to echo throughout history today. Farmer's not going to plant weeds right next to his crop. To this day, and I haven't worked on the farm in years, to this day it bothers me to ride by a patch of peanuts and see weeds growing in them. If you ever pulled weeds out of peanuts, we had one field, Mr. Hawkins and Progressive Farmer was going to come and photograph that field as a candidate for the cover of Progressive Farmer one year. We were out there just about with tweezers, getting those, and we didn't throw them down. We didn't throw the weeds down. No. We gathered them up and took them out of the field. They didn't put our peanut patch on the cover of Progressive Farmer, but it was worthy for the cover when we finished. Farmers aren't going to plant weeds right next to their crop because they don't want them slipping into their crop. Parents. Grandparents, you have a role too, but I want to talk to parents for just a minute. Your convictions don't just shape your life. They shape the lives of your children and their children and their children. Compromise today is only going to be increased with compromise in the days ahead. A greater level of compromise in the days ahead. Our compromise impacts our churches. It impacts our communities. Our lack of conviction brings decay all around us. And it's not just to me as an individual. It spreads like a cancer. It spreads like some sort of fungus or some sort of virus. That decay comes and it spreads and it worsens and worsens and worsens from generation to generation. And we see this, and the fallout that comes from that can be traced back to where we began to compromise. Does it bother you to watch the news and to read articles? I do more reading to get my news, but does it bother you to see that a lot of the problems that we face in the world today are children who have been neglected and allowed to spend all of their time in their bedroom on a video game, online, digging deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper? A computer's not a substitute for a parent and can never be a substitute for a parent. Abraham and Lot stand as contrast with one another. One with conviction, one with compromise. One of them left a legacy of blessing, the other a legacy of brokenness. What convictions guide you today in your life, in your heart? What convictions are guiding you right now? Are you interceding like Abraham? Are you putting a hedge of protection around your children? It's not easy. No, it's not easy at all to go counterculture with your children. The pressure is great. It's tremendous. But your heritage is worth it. Your children and their children and their children, that heritage begins with you. I went against everything in my family because my family was not a God-fearing family. Even after we were married and started having children, there were snide comments at some of the decisions we made about our children that came from our family members. Was it painful? It was absolutely painful. Were there times that it was envious? I was envious because I wanted my family to laugh and choose to come and visit us and our children like they did others and their children. But we were the odd ones because we were believers. Lot knew right from wrong. He didn't do right from wrong. We need conviction that says, I'm not going to compromise in any way, because the compromises you make today are going to become the lifestyle tomorrow and is going to continue decaying down the generations. As Joshua said, as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord.